Racing fans, welcome to episode 5B of the big Group 1 racing show for 2016/17. This is the show where I preview every single Australian Group 1 race. Now today's episode is a massive episode. I'm going to be previewing 3 big spring Group 1 races that are held in Sydney at Royal Randwick. It's going to be held on Saturday on AFL Grand Final Day, so the Sydney fans, well, they have a lot to look forward to. They have 3 massive Group 1s as well as the Sydney Swans in the AFL Grand Final. You can see that I'm actually against the Sydney Swans. I am a Western Bulldogs supporter, so before we get into the show, I'd just like to say, go Dogs. But anyway, let's get straight into the show. We start with the first Group 1 of the day, and that is the Flight Stakes. So the Group 1 Sydney Airport Flight Stakes, we ran at 3:20 PM Australian Eastern Time at Royal Randwick, of course, on Saturday, the 1st of October. Of course, you can watch the race on 7/2 and Sky Racing 1. Let's have a look at the field. Yankee Rose, the massive favourite in this race at $1.90. Global Glamour, the next favourite at $4.60. Awoke, $7. Skylight Glow, also at $7. Cezanne is at $9.50. Bridal Lane at $41. And you can see there that Omi Sword and Quick Feet scratched from the race. So there's only a field. It was supposed to be a field of 8 horses, but it's now cut down to a small field of 6. Let's have a look at the field in depth. Number 1, we have the favourite Yankee Rose, who will be jockeyed by Blake Shin. Won the Series Produce over 1,400 metres at Royal Randwick earlier in the year. Could only settle for 6 in the Golden Rose just a couple of weeks ago at Rose Hill Gardens. Stepping up to the 1,600 metres for the first time and trying to win over the 1,600 metre distance for the first time. Coming out at Barrier 5, it's the one to beat really, but yeah, hasn't won over that 1,600 metre before, but there is a lot of horses in this race who haven't won over that distance either. So it's the big favourite, it's the one to watch, and you can see there $1.90 before in the field that I talked about before. Big favourite. Number 3, we have Skylight Glow, backed by the punters at $7. Glenn Schofield will be aboard this horse. It came second in what was a very close race in the T Rose a few weeks ago on the 17th of September at Royal Randwick. It was up the front for most of that race, but then could only settle for second. It should take the early lead in this race in the Flight Stakes. I would be surprised if it wasn't at least in the top 3 in the early stages of the 1,600 metre Flight Stakes. Yeah, like I said, second in the T Rose. It was a close race, so expected to probably be there in the finish. Number 5, we have Cezanne, who is backed by the punters at $9.50. A Chris Waller trained horse with James McDonald on board as the jockey. Barrier 6 it is coming out of. It came 4th in the T Rose. Was up the back for most of the race, but had a good finish down the straight and did test the other horses in what was a very, very close finish, as I mentioned before. If I think it's up the back, if it's going to be up the back for this race, like it was in the T Rose, then I don't give it much of a chance. But it's definitely one to look out for. Of course, stepping up from the 1,400 metres in the T Rose to the 1,600 metres will be the big test. It's an interesting horse to look at. Number 6, we have Global Glamour, who is backed by the punters at $4.60, the second favourite for the Flight Stakes for 2016. Didn't have the best start in the T Rose, and because of that, it resulted in this horse getting 6th place in that race. I think the extra 200 metres from the 1,400 to the 1,600 metres will suit this horse, And to be quite honest, it may be Yankee Rose's biggest threat in this race, because I think this horse will step up nicely to that extra 200 metres. It's one between, it only has a win range of 1000, but I think the 1600 metres will suit this horse. Number 7, we have Awoke, backed by the punters at $7. Only came 7th in the T Rose out of the 10 horses, which was disappointing. It was at the back of the field for most of the race. Gave it a crack down the straight, but could only settle for 7th. So it's definitely one of those chances, a Chris Waller trained horse that you can't rule out. But you know, if it's at the back of the field for most of the race, you can't really. This horse can't rely on going down the straight, and well, it can in a short field, but it's probably not preferable. So, but it's definitely one of the chances in this race. Probably a chance to place, more than a chance to win. Last but not least, we have Bridle Lane, backed by the punters at $41 rather. And it's placed in 4 of its last 5 races, the only horse to have won over the 1600 metre distance, so that's a factor for this horse going into this race. But you would have to say that this race will be a lot tougher than the races that it's previously won in, especially in its race that it actually won over that 1600 metre distance. So yeah, tough race for this horse, but the only horse to have won over that 1600 metre distance has to be a factor. Okay, let's get into my tips for the 2016 Group 1 Sydney Airport Flight Stakes. I'll start with my first placed horse, and that is Yankee Rose, backed by the punters at $1.90. Disappointing in the Golden Rose, 6 out of the 14 horse field. I think it will breeze through this race though and be able to cope with the 1600 metre distance, and because of it being a small field, it's clearly the one to beat in this race. So Yankee Rose first for me, no doubt about it. I've then got second place Global Glamour. Like I mentioned before, didn't have the best start to the T Rose, was out and probably over raced a little bit. That's what the commentator described it as, probably over raced a little bit at the start, and then in the end couldn't quite cope and ended up coming 6 out of the 10 horse field. So I think with a better start, as well as that extra 200 metres from the 1400 metres in the T Rose, will definitely suit this horse. And the speed map will suggest that it will probably be in the top 3 horses at the start. So I'm going second for Global Glamour. And then the roughie of the race, I mentioned before that Skylight Glow is probably the one to expect to be at the finish, and it's definitely a roughie to look out for. Backed at $7, up the front for most of the race in the T Rose, came second in the end, which was not a bad effort considering how close it was. I think it will take the early lead. That's what the speed map suggests, and if it does, it's definitely a real roughie to win the race, because you know, it's been good. It was good last start, just obviously with that close finish could only settle for second. So Skylight Glow is my roughie of the race in the Flight Stakes. Okay, time now to get into the second Group 1 of the day at Royal Randwick on Saturday. It is the Tab Epsom handicap, probably the most highlighted Group 1 of the day. It will be ran at 4 o'clock PM, that's New South Wales time, of course. Let's have a look at the field. We have the favourite, a Great Britain horse, number 9, McCreary, backed by the punters at $5.50. Next best is Horaki at $7.50. Palantino at $7. You have Fabriso at $7.50. Happy Clapper at $9.50. Macintosh at $12. La Romans at $13. Sons of John at $21. Heavens Above at $18. Vanbrugh at $21. Tugerson, the New Zealand horse, is at backed by the punters at $26. Debiani, the Island horse, at $41, and then rounding out the field is Mighty Lucky with $51. So you can see there that the odds suggest that this is going to be a really close race and a real quality field on Saturday. So let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into having a look at the field in depth. We start with number 1, Palantino. Had a great win in the Makybe Diva Stakes to beat its mate in Blackheart Bart. That was a couple of weeks ago over the 1600 metre distance. And yeah, like I said, brilliant run last start. Will Royal Randwick suit? That's the question. From my research, it hasn't ran at Royal Randwick at all yet, so this might be a bit of a shock to the system for it, but yeah, look out for it. Can't rule it out. It's definitely going to be there in the finish, and a Cox Plate might be on the agenda for Palantino next up after this race. Number 2, we have one of the big chances. That is Hierarchy, who is backed by the punters at $7. One of the big chances. Tougher field than the last couple, but definitely a big chance. Came second in the GO main a couple of weeks ago to Winks and won the Tramway a few weeks ago, 3rd of September at Royal Randwick. So it knows the track well. It's definitely one of the big chances to look out for. Coming out of barrier 10, James McDonald will be on board. Number 3, we have La Roman. Huey Bowman will be on board. It's coming out of barrier 3, has a wind range of 1000 to 1600 metres. Second in its last 2 races. Won its last 1600 metre race at Royal Randwick, so it knows the track, and it's definitely a chance, no doubt about it. Backed by the punters at $13. Could be a roughie to look out for, of course, slotting down the odds a little bit in the higher up section or the midway section of the odds. It's definitely a chance, definitely a roughie chance. Number 4, we have Happy Clapper, backed by the punters at $9.50, which is interesting because its form doesn't look too great. 6th, 5th, 6th and 8th in its last 4 runs. Of course, earlier in the year, early April, it came 3rd in the Queen Elizabeth Stakes over the 2,000 metre distance. Can run over the 1,600 metre journey. That's what the Epsom handicap will be ran over, the 1,600 metre distance. So the distance will suit. Whether I think it will be there in the finish or not, I'm not too sure, because the form doesn't really suggest that, especially its last run, 6 in the Ritchie, although that wasn't too bad of a run over the 1,400 metre distance. Number 5, we have Mighty Lucky, who is backed by the punters at a whopping $51. That is the highest odds for this race. Came 7th in its last run at Royal Randwick in the Ritchie. It came first over the 1,600 metre journey at Durban in the Lord Mayor's Cup in the late stages of May. Can run the distance, but it will be a tough race considering the quality in the Epsom. Number 6, we have Dibby Yanni, who is going to be jockeyed by Damien Lane, backed by the punters at $41. 3rd in its last race in the Tramway over the 1,400 metres at Royal Randwick. Of course, in another race at Royal Randwick in the late stages of February in the Norton, it came 2nd. That was a Group 1, of course. Blake Shin was on board. It's a little sneaky roughie considering it can run over the distance, but the 7-year-old horse is not in the best of form. Number 7, we have Sons of John, who'll be ridden by the great Glenn Boss, backed by the punters at $21. Won the Ritchie a few weeks ago on the 17th of September at Royal Randwick. Blake Shin was aboard that horse that day. 6 in the Tramway a few weeks ago as well. I don't think the barrier will suit. I think the barrier, which is barrier 13, might be a little bit of a problem. It might be a little bit too out wide, but I'm expecting it to be in amongst the leaders early. If you want to know a fact about this horse, came second last in the Melbourne Cup. Second last in the Melbourne Cup. Number 8, we have Macintosh. I do like the look of this horse because it's coming off a great win last start in the Theo Marks at Rose Hill on the 10th of September. It's won 4 of its last 5 races. Basically, it's won over the 1,600 metres before. So I think we'll take the early lead in this race. We'll probably have front edge heading into the straight, and who knows, could get up. It's definitely a roughie to look out for. Number 9, we have Macquarie, who is backed by the punters at $5.50. This is the favourite, a Great Britain horse. A 5-year-old male horse, in fact, and it's won its last 2 races. One of them was at Rose Hill Gardens. and also one of them was over the 1600 metres. So it's in good form going into this race, and you can understand why it's the favourite. Not sure if it's the one to beat at this stage, but it's definitely the favourite in what will be a very close Epsom. Number 10, we have Heavens Above, who has placed in 3 of its last 5 races, looking to do well because the Caulfield Cup or the Melbourne Cup or even the Cox Plate is on its agenda after this race for this horse, so it is looking to do very, very well. Its win range is between 1200 metres to 1600 metres. It came second in the 1600 metres Queen Turf in the early stages of April, has won over the 1600 metres before, so definitely a horse to look out for. Coming out of barrier 8, Corey Brown is on board. Tim Martin is the trainer. Number 11, we have Vanbrugh, who is a Chris Waller trained horse, came 4th out of the 6 horses in the Geo Main a couple of weeks ago. Of course, Winks won that race. Haraki was in that race as well, came 2nd. It's not in the best of form. Before the Geo Main, it came 5th, 2nd, 5th and 9th in its last 4 races. So it's not in the best of form. Can run over the 1600 metre journey, but whether it will do well or not, I'm doubting that it will. Number 12, we have another Chris Waller trained horse, and that is Toggerson, backed by the punters at $26. Second in its last race over the 1400 metres. That was in the Ritchie, but it hasn't won over the 1600 metre journey. So how can it adapt to the extra 200 metres from that Ritchie race a couple of weeks ago over the 1400 metres? I'm not sure, considering some of the horses that are in this race who have actually won over that 1600 metre distance. So it might get a bit of experience from this Group 1 race, but I don't think it will be there in the finish. And last but not least, we have number 13, Fabriso, who's been first in 2 of its last 3 races. One was over the 1600 metre journey. Should be the front runner early. It's predicting the speed map that it will be out early in this race. The front runner of this race, maybe with McIntosh as well. Whether it can hold that lead or not, I'm not sure. Backed by the punters at $13. Sneaky Ruffy. Okay, let's get straight into my tips for the Epsom handicap. I start with my first placed horse, and that is number 2, Haraki, backed by the punters at $7. A big chance to win this race, and well, it's known to me lately as the runner-up to Winks. It's been the runner-up to Winks quite a few times now. I think this is going to be the time where it is going to win. Won the Tramway, came 2nd in the Geo Main. It's had some good preparation to come up to this race, and I think it will take out the chocolates when it wins this race on Saturday at Royal Randwick. So Haraki is my first placed horse. I've gone second place. Palantino, of course. First in the Maccabi Diva Stakes a couple of weeks ago with Blackheart Bart runner-up. It's definitely one of the big chances, and it will take it up to Haraki, but I think it will just come 2nd. So Palantino's 2nd for me, and then 3rd is Le Roman, who's come 2nd in its last 2 races. Of course, won its last 1600 metre race at Royal Randwick. I mentioned that before. It's a big chance. It's in good form. Backed by the punters at $13. I think we'll be up there in the top 3, finishing 3rd. And then the roughie of the race, I've decided to put McIntosh as the roughie of the race. I mentioned before that the speed map is suggesting that it will be out early, and that seems to be a bit of a trend for this horse. It's coming off a great Theo Marks race where it came first over the 1300 metres. The 1600 metre distance should suit, and it's definitely one to look out for. Maybe a horse that is worth putting $1 each way bet on, because it's definitely a roughie that you should look out for. It's a chance, and with Chris Waller the trainer, Tommy Berry on board, yeah, it's a roughie to look out for. And the final Group 1 of the day at Royal Randwick on Epsom Day on Saturday is the Metropolitan. I'm probably excited the most about this race. The Epsom is going to be an absolute beauty race. It's got some quality in the field, but I think this one has got the most quality. And this race will be ran at 4:40 PM. Will be ran at the back stages of the 2016 AFL Grand Final. Let's have a look at the field. The favourite is a New Zealand horse, Antonio Giuseppe, at $6. Sir Jon Horford is the next best at $7. Sacred Master is at $7.50, as well as Allergic. You then have Who Shot the Barman at $8.50. Magic Hurricane at $11. Storm the Stars, the USA horse, backed by the punters, at $14. Janib at $15. DIC at $16. Sense of Occasion at $26, as well as Grand Marshal. You have a mixed, the New Zealand trained horse at $81, and then Quartermaster is backed by the punters at a whopping $301. So let's get straight into having a look at the field in depth. Number 1, we have Who Shot the Barman, a Chris Waller trained horse backed by the punters at $8.50. Has not won a race since the Zipping Classic last year. Came second in the Hill Stakes at Royal Randwick a couple of weeks ago on Saturday the 17th of September. It's an 8-year-old horse, but I just feel like after that second place Hill Stakes, it's just starting to wind up ready for the spring racing carnival. Of course, the Caulfield Cup, Cox Plate, I think, or even the Melbourne Cup could be on the agenda for this horse, and this is the distance that it likes. So I tell you what, you can't rule out this horse. $8.50, you probably would expect it a bit lower, but you can't rule it out, this horse. It may just be starting to wind up, especially when this race is ran over the 2,400 metres, which is what this horse is suited to. Number 2, we have Storm the Stars, another Chris Waller trained horse. I tell you what, Chris Waller has a lot of horses in this race, so he's surely going to get one winner, that's for sure. But Barrier 4, third in the last 2 of its races, can do well over distances like this, and well, it was the front runner in the Hill Stakes for most of that race, so and obviously it could only settle for third. So yeah, another good chance to place in this race, possibly even win it. It's one of those ones that you can't rule out. It is backed by the punters at $14, but yeah, give it a chance in this race. It is a good horse, a good United States horse. At number 3, we have Grant Marshal, who is another Chris Waller trained horse, backed by the punters at $26. Came second in the Gemsford on the Saturday, the 3rd of September, and then 6 out of the 6 horses in the Hill Stakes at Royal Randwick on the 17th of September over the 2,000 metres. So it can run over the 2,400 metres. It has proven that before, and it has that win range, but the quality of this field will test this horse. With Craig Williams on board, though, it might just be a small chance. At $11 by the punters, we have number 4, Magic Hurricane, who has a win range of 1,400 metres to 2,400 metres, coming out of Barrier 3, 4th only in the Hill Stakes out of the 6 horses, which was kind of disappointing. The previous race, 3rd, 5th, 9th and 6th, but I think it's best suited to distances like this. So that extra 400 metres from the Hill Stakes might suit this horse, and it may get up and finish in the top 5 possibly. Of course, James McDonald will be the jockey on this horse for the Metropolitan. Number 5, we have Sir Jon Horford, who is the second favourite for this race, backed by the punters at $7, placed in 5 of its last 5 runs. Its highlighted run that we're going to highlight here is second in the Brisbane Cup at Eagle Farm over the 2,400 metres. It has a win range of 1,800 metres to 2,400 metres, which suggests that these kind of distances does suit this horse. Coming out of Barrier 6, definitely a chance to place, but also to win, and maybe in the top 5 as well. Number 6, we have Janib, who hasn't won a race since the Ballarat Cup last year. It came second in its last run over the 2,400 metres at Rose Hill on Saturday the 24th of September. It's a tougher race though, because that was out of 5 horses, so it was a very small field for that race. This will be a tougher race, but it's a roughie because it can win over those sort of long distances. So don't rule it out. It's a Chris Waller trained horse, another Chris Waller trained horse. It will be a tough race for it, but I think it's going to be a roughie to look out for. Number 7, we have Sacred Master, who is backed by the punters at $7.50. So Of course, the punters have suggested that this is one of the favourites to win the race. A Chris Waller trained horse, another Chris Waller trained horse, won its last 2400 metre race back in February. The question is, will Royal Randwick suit this horse? From my research, it hasn't actually ran a lot at Royal Randwick, if ever at all. It came 8th at Rose Hill in one of its races from barrier 12, so it suggests that barrier 12, which is the barrier for this horse in the Metropolitan, that barrier 12, it doesn't do so well from this barrier, so that might be a bit of a concern for this horse. But it's the third favourite, and yeah, I suppose it's one to look out for. And well, it has a win range of 1600 metres to 2400 metres, so it can run over this distance. Number 8, we have Allergic, who won its last race over the 2400 metres, which was a good run. That's what I found anyway. It could be top 6 worthy in this race. It definitely has the capacity to do so, but this will be a tougher field than that race last start. Of course, that was out of 5 horses, and how many horses are in this race? 11, so, or 13 or something like that. So it will be a tougher field. I reckon it can handle it though. That's the thing that I've gathered from researching this horse. I reckon it can handle it, and who knows, maybe a top 6 finish for this horse. Number 9, we have Sense of Occasion, who is backed by the punters at $26. Came first in the Premier Cup at Rose Hill in the back stages of August, but besides that, it's not really the best looking form guide. I suppose 4th last start, 4th. First in a trial run, and then 6 out of the 8 horses at Moonee Valley in the early stages of June. But yeah, I think this will be a tough race for this horse. Its last 2400 metre win was way back in May 2015, so it hasn't won over this distance for quite a long time. Number 10, we have a Mext, who is backed by the punters a whopping $81. Winner of the Caloundra Cup in July, the 2nd of July 2016. That was over the 2400 metres, so it's won over this distance before, but you know, coming from the Caloundra Cup to Royal Randwick to race in a massive spring Group 1 race is going to be a massive change for this horse, so I think this is going to be a tough race for this horse. Number 11, we have Diaishi, who is backed by the punters at $16. Gay Waterhouse is one of the trainers for this horse. Kieran McAvoy will be on board. It's come second in its last 2 races. One of them was over 2200 metres. Ran in the Sydney Cup in the early stages of April, but came 9th out of the 11 horse field in that race, so not the best run in that race. Of course, that was over the 3200 metres, so a larger distance than the 2400 metres. Hasn't won over the 2400 metres before, so you know, backed at $16 is a bit generous considering this horse's form. It's not really the best looking form guide, although second in its last 2 races. I suppose you can't rule it out, but it's not really one of the big chances. Number 12, we have the favourite, Antonio Giuseppe, who is a Chris Waller trained horse, and this is his 6th horse in this race. He just had so many horses that it's just ridiculous. In fact, he nearly owns nearly half the field. It's just ridiculous. He should, you know, create his own race or something and just pack it and call it after Chris Waller and pack it with all his horses. But no, look, Chris Waller, a great trainer. Glenn Boss is on board this horse, who is in good form. Won its last 4 races, hasn't won over the 2400 metres. That's the question going into this race for this horse. It will be a big step up from the races it's been running in, but it's the favourite for a reason, and that's because it's in some good form. And finally, rounding out the field in the Metropolitan for 2016, we have number 13, Quartermaster, who is backed by the punters at $301. That is massive odds, no question about that. Paul Perry is the trainer for this horse. It's going to find it difficult, I reckon. 10th, 9th, 6th, 10th and 5th. That's its last 5 races. And its win range is 1600 metres to 2000 metres. So, yeah, it hasn't won over the 2400 metres. Its form's not great. I can't see how it's going to be anywhere towards the finish. Okay, time now for my Metropolitan tips for 2016. I'll start with my first placed horse, and that is Who Shot the Barman. I'm going to place him at first. I think, like I mentioned before, I think he's just starting to wind up after the Hill Stakes, And he's in a good position early, that's what the speed map is suggesting, and does well over these distances. So I think Who Shot the Barman is going to cause a massive boil over and win this race. It's only backed at $8.50, which is the fifth favourite in this race. So first for me for Who Shot the Barman. And then second place, I have gone, as I have a look at my notes here, I forgot who I've gone. I've gone Sir Jon Horford, who is backed by the punters at $7. Has placed in all of its last 5 races, so I think it's going to place in this race. Of course, like I mentioned, second in the Brisbane Cup, has won over the 2,400 metres before. I think it will challenge Who Shot the Barman, but I think it will come second. So that is my second placed horse. And then the third placed horse I have slotted in is Magic Hurricane, who didn't have the best run last start, only 4th out of the 6 horses in the Hill Stakes, but you know, 2,400 metres seems to be the distance for this horse, and I think it is going to come third, backed by the punters at $11. And then the roughie of the race, I've gone the USA horse, and that is Storm the Stars. I think third in its last 2 races. Could do well over distances like these, and it was at the front for most of its last race. I think it's going to be, as I have a look at the speed map here and just remind myself, yeah, it's going to be up the front for most of the race, or the early part of the race at least. So I think if it holds its line, you never quite know. You never quite know. Can't rule out this horse. It's definitely a roughie for me. And that is it for this episode of the big Group 1 racing show. Epsom Day preview, of course. It is a highlight in Sydney Spring Racing for every racing season. So it's going to be a great day there at Royal Randwick on Saturday, especially when the Sydney State has their Sydney Swans in the AFL Grand Final. So the Sydney, if you're at the races, you can watch the races and also enjoy the Grand Final as well. A great day on Saturday. Now we still have one more part to go in episode 5. That is episode 5C, coming up on Saturday the 1st of October. The Turnbull Stakes preview will feature, of course, one of the big highlights of the Spring Racing Carnival is the Turnbull Stakes. It's a big Group 1 race, and it's a good field this year. So do stay tuned for episode 5C, the Turnbull Stakes preview. Until then, I'm Jacob. Enjoy Epsom Day. Bye for now.